Welcome to Once Upon a Teeny Stories. Tonight we'll hear the magical tale of the Elves and the Shoemaker, a story about kindness, gratitude, and how good deeds can bring unexpected blessings. Snuggle up, get cozy, and let's begin. Once upon a time there lived a kind shoemaker and his wife. They worked hard every day, but they had become very poor. One evening, the shoemaker looked at his workbench and sighed. "I only have enough leather left to make one more pair of shoes," he said sadly. He carefully cut the leather pieces and laid them on the table. Then he went to bed, hoping things would somehow get better. The next morning, the shoemaker walked into his workshop and stopped in amazement. There on his table sat a beautiful pair of finished shoes. The stitching was perfect. The leather shined. They were the finest shoes he had ever seen. Who could have made these, he wondered. Soon a customer came by and loved the shoes so much that he paid a generous price for them. With the money earned, the shoemaker bought enough leather for 2 pairs of shoes. Again, he carefully cut the leather and left it on the workbench overnight. The next morning, 2 beautiful pairs of shoes were waiting for him. The shoemaker and his wife could hardly believe it. Day after day, the same thing happened. Every morning, more wonderful shoes appeared. Soon, people traveled from all around to buy them. As the shoemaker's business grew, he and his wife became curious. "We must discover who is helping us," said his wife. One cold winter evening, they hid quietly behind a curtain in the workshop. The clock struck midnight. Then, to their surprise, 2 tiny elves appeared. They jumped onto the workbench and began sewing, stitching, and polishing with incredible speed. The little elves worked happily all night long. Their tiny hands moved so quickly that the leather seemed to dance beneath their fingers. They laughed softly as they stitched each shoe to perfection. Before sunrise, they finished their work and slipped away into the darkness. The shoemaker and his wife smiled. Now they knew who their mysterious helpers were. As Christmas approached, the shoemaker's wife had an idea. "The elves have helped us so much," she said. "Look at their clothes. They're worn and patched." "We should make them gifts," agreed the shoemaker. Together, they worked late into the evenings. The wife sewed tiny shirts, jackets, and trousers. The shoemaker crafted tiny shoes just the right size for elf feet. On Christmas Eve, instead of leather, the couple placed the tiny clothes and shoes on the workbench. Then they hid and waited. At midnight, the elves returned. When they saw the gifts, their eyes sparkled with joy. They quickly put on their new clothes and admired their tiny, new, shiny shoes. The elves laughed and danced around the workshop. They twirled, skipped, and sang cheerful songs. They were so happy with their gifts that they danced all around the room. Then they waved goodbye and disappeared into the night. The shoemaker and his wife never saw them again, but they knew the elves would always remember their kindness. And from that day forward, the shoemaker's business continued to thrive, and he and his wife lived happily ever after. And so we learned that kindness and gratitude have a special kind of magic. The shoemaker was grateful for the help he received, and he found a way to give back. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can make the biggest difference. Thank you for joining us for the Elves and the Shoemaker. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and come back for more magical bedtime stories with Once Upon a Teeny Stories.